Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll Masechtas Zevachim daf Ayin Tes. We're going to begin in the middle of Ayin Tes with Aleph. We've been learning about the dinim of min b'mino, min she'enu minoi. Do we go basaroiv? Do we go basamara? So on this, Amar Rabbanan b'taima, Amar Rabbanan b'ruba. So there are times in which we mention that we go basar taima, that if you're able to taste the item, that gives you the indication of the status of this mixture. Sometimes we go basarov, yamarabanan b'chazusa. Yet there's sometimes we go after the appearance. So in this we say like this: min b'sheino minai. This is a nice yisod over here. Min b'sheino minai. So let's say you have two different things that are, again, they're not the same and they're mixed together. Can we say b'taima? Now, it makes sense. If it's min b'mino, if it's the same food, let's say meat and meat, they have the same taste. So obviously you can't go basar taima when it's min b'mino. So min b'she'enu minoi, we go basar taima, which some are mishar b'shishim, like 1 to 60th ratio. Min b'mino is baruba, but when it comes to min b'minoi, it's a rov. And heicha de'ika chazusa, let's say there is like certain colors, like we said, for example, if water fell into the blood, so you'll have to do the zrika with that blood. So it depends if it looks like blood. So again, if you're able to tell the difference between its discoloration, then we're going to go basar mara. Says Rashi, milu deloy tali b'taima el b'chazusa k'gain le'inin tfilas mikva b'chazusa. When it comes to being toiv in a mikvah, and there's different things that fell into the mikvah, so we go basar chazusa, what it looks like. Okay, so that is the basics. Upliga de Rabbi Elazar. Now this disagrees with the sheet of Rabbi Elazar, says Rashi. Ha de Reish Lakish, the statement of Reish Lakish before Yermer Isurin Mevatlin Zedzeh. He held that one Isser can mevatl the other Isser, which we saw by Pigel, Noiser, and Tameh, and you ate it, even though you had each one was a kazayas, and you ate it, you're not going to be chay malchus. The Yomi Rabbi Lezer kashem shein mitzvahs mevatlos zuadzu kach ein isur mevatlos mevatin zuadzu. We hold this shita is unlike the shita of Reish Lakish, that isurim are not mevatel one another, and therefore Yutaka would get malchus. Man shamas lady emer ein mitzvahs mevatlos zuadzu. Who's the shita that says that you do two mitzvahs which are mixed together, that they're not batal, rather each one stands on its own? Hillel he, as we continue in the famous Gemara of Hillel and the Hill sandwich, the Sanya Omer level Hillel Zakan Shahaya Karichin Bavasachas, the Oichin Mishim Shenemar Al Matzah Samorim Yochluhu. Okay, one of our favorite parts of the Seder. So what is the whole chiddush? Like Hillel did this. Like, what a chiddush that he did this. It actually was a tremendous chiddush of what Hillel did, because you would maybe think, says Rashi, lo asi tam morer mavatli tam matzah, because you're eating matzah and morer. So maybe if you would eat them together, one mitzvah is mavatl the other. So you say he doesn't hold like that. So that's the chiddush of Hillel. Of course, we do both at our Seder. We eat matzah, then we eat mar, then we eat them both together. Okay. All right. Ayin Testament base. Tanraban. So, when it comes to a charsin shel zava, says Rashi, this is an avit shel meraglayim. So you have a earthenware vessel which was broken, and it was used like as a bedpan, like as a urinal. Says Rashi, v'nishmar v'charesav bolu b'meraglayim hazavim, and there was meraglayim of a zav that was absorbed into this these broken pieces. Vein matamid b'masa. We know that a zav is matama b'masa. Now, even though it was absorbed, as it says, skipping to the fourth line of Rashi, v'naful aver hatanur. If, let's say, it falls into the airspace of a tanur, hatanur tameh, so the oven's tameh, shesayv mashgil lotzes behesek hatanur, because the liquid will come out through the heat of the oven. Okay. So we say like this: Pamri shon v'sheni tameh. If let's say you wash it out the first time, and then a second time, it's still tummy because whatever was absorbed into that pot is still there. So you need to rinse it more than twice, and therefore shlishi tar. The third time, it's okay. Once you put water into the third time, it's tahar, because we're going to say that the meraglayim, which was boilea, was pilot. Now, b'mediv or memorim, when do we say that this works? Is shenaslo soichen mayim. If you put water in there, of a lo naslo soichen mayim, but let's say you didn't put in water. Let's say you put in other urine, which would therefore be min b'minoi. So afilu asiri tame, even the 10th time it's tame. So what do we see? That if you have tahar urine, which is min b'minoi, it's not going to be mavatal. Min b'mino is not batal. Even though we saw before that we said over here that min b'mino is baruboy, right? So this seems to be against what we said. Okay. Afilu asiri tame. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer Shlishi, the third time, Alpha Bishul Naslo Seichen Mayim Tahar. That even if, let's say, it wasn't water that you used, but let's say other Tahar Meraglayim, that will, if you rinsed it out a few times with other Meraglayim, then the third time's a charm. So Man Shamas Hadiyam Min B'Minu Batal Rabbi Huda. Now this Shita, who says that Min B'Minu is not Batal, even though we said it's Batal B'Roi, Rabbi Huda says it's not, that's a Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rashi, V'shma mina man tanakama de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Rabbi Yehuda. Must be the statement is Rabbi Yehuda. The kaim the mashkin hanivloim becheres betlos zimni palti. After 3 times it works. Reminhu. So I'll ask you the question. Pishtan she tavasai nida masitai tahar. Let's say you have a nida that was spinning some thread, and we say, says Rashi, Shahari Yavesh Haroik. Even though it's true there may be some spittles there, and she licks the thread to help the sewing, nonetheless we say it's tahar because it dried up. And therefore once it's dried, it no longer has the capacity to be matam. It's only when it's wet. However, if let's say the threads are still wet from her spittles, then it's tamei mishumashke pia, because of the liquid from her mouth. Yehuda Omer afha roitfo b'mayim tamei. It says even the roitiv from her of water is tamei mishumashke pia. V'afil tuva, even a lot. So l'chayra, this is a question. So says Rashi. Well, let's first see the Rashi before. But they sefta mistektas taharis. Even if you would rinse it out with water, after it dried up, all of a sudden the spittle becomes wet, because of the other waters, the tummy mishum mashkepia. Apparently, if you kovsu pamim harbi kamertame, even if it was done many times. But how is that true when we said before that when it comes to doing this at least, let's say 3 times, that even though you were rinsing out the meraglayim of the zav, that will be tahar. So why over here a fil tuva doesn't work? So my papa shani roik de karer. That spittle is different because it can stick onto the clothes, so you can't get totally. It doesn't completely come out. So that's the distinction. So you're right. Normally it would work after a few times, but when it comes to roik, we are more strict. Says question 2. Charson shel zav zava o pishtan shetavaso nida shebailin heim moyel behem kimos mayim l'taharon. So when it comes to the cheres, it helps if, let's say, you wash it the 3rd time. Or if it comes to pishtan of these threads, it will not help because oilam tame kashulach. As long as it's always moist, it's always going to be a problem. It'll always be a problem. Okay. All right. Okay, we're just going to get to the Mishnah today. So, This ar bedam hapsulim yishavach la'ama. So let's see this Mishnah. So the Mishnah said on Ayin Zayin Mid Beis, it said again dam. Let's just see the whole Mishnah. Dam shnis ar b'mayim, as we said, if you have blood that gets mixed with water. So if let's say the water hit the blood first, right? The blood was there. Notice the blood was there, and then the water dripped onto it. So im yesh b'moris dam koshers. If it still looks like blood, it's kosher. This ar b'yayin, let's say blood got mixed up with wine. We say as though the wine is actually water. Therefore, if it looks like blood, then it's still good. This ar b'dam behema or b'dam hachaya. Let's say you have this dam and that dam, so we consider the other bloods as though it's like water. So therefore, therefore it'll be as though it's water. Then it'll be royin. That's what he said. Rabbi Huda Omer ein dam mevatel dam, because he holds min b'mino is not batel, because one's dam, the other one's dam, so min b'mino is not batel. That was the sheet that we said before. Just said this ar b'dam psulim. If it got mixed up with dam psulim, yishafech ha'ama, then it gets spilled into this cistern, this amma, it's called. They feel, even if, let's say, there's a lot of kosher blood or everything there, it doesn't matter. If you have dam psulim, for example, reiva v'nirva, or shchuti chutz, or chutz you shechted chutz l'zman, chutz l'mkaimai. So he said that it has to be spilled to the amma. But dam tamsis, which is by the time of the shchita, also yishavach amma, same thing. If it was mixed up with other good blood, Rabbi Lezer machshir imo nimlach v'nasin kosher. Says Rabbi Lezer disagrees. There's the imo nimlach. You didn't consult anyone and you did it, then it will be kosher. And this apparently is according to Tanakama. Rashi says over there, afilo chadchila. Okay. So now we understand that. We can understand our Mishnah, our Gemara a little bit better. Let's see it. So this Arev, this Arev b'dam hapsul mishavach alma. So let's say good bloods got mixed in with, let's say, roiva and nirva blood. So it doesn't matter how much. So my kimifli. Amrav zvid b'gayzrin gezer b'mikdash kimifli. The question is, are we going to be geyser? De marsavar geyser, marsavar lo gazrina. So there's a whole machlokas whether or not you're geyser. So let's go straight into Rashi. B'geyzrin gezera. Im oisin siag b'kachim. Are we going to make a fence? When it comes to the dinim of kachim, l'harchik min aveira. V'lo yichashin and l'hefsid kachim. The truth is, by doing that, we're going to make a hefsid kachim. Maybe we don't concern ourselves with that. So yavsid es elu b'shvil siag yecherem kimifagi. So Tanakh hold we're geyser. Hilkach this arab dam kosher b'dam posel, or for that matter b'dam tamsis. If it gets mixed up, yafol pi she'ein b'psul v'lo b'tamsis kedei levatel as a kosher. Even though, let's say, there's not so much in there, nonetheless, yishavach alma, we spill the whole thing, even though it's a tiny amount in comparison to all the other dam. Why gezer dilma astil achshiri nami hecha diesh b'dam absul? What if there's a lot of dam psul in another case? But dam tamsis kedei levatel as a kosher. So even though it's not that much to be mevatel the dam kosher, but maybe should be geyser atu, a situation where there will be so much dam posel that it would be mevatel the dam kosher. V'hai deloy gezrinan hachi b'nis areh b'dam habehemo b'dam achaya. Why don't we say that also when it comes to the mixture of behema and achaya? Says Rashi, mishum dechulin ba'azar lo shchichi. Because this whole notion of achaya, it's not common. The fact that you're going to have a behema, rather a chaya in the base of mikdash, of a psul and shchichi. So therefore, we're not milsul lo shchichi goes to rabbanon. But when it comes to psul, it is shchichi, and also apparently according to this at least, dam tamsis is shchiach. Okay, skipping, and then however Rabbi Lezer says that no, we don't make such a gezer. Says Rashi, of a nisar dam tamsis l'chud polig. He doesn't argue in the case of the dam psulim, but rather only by dam tamsis. Mishum de kasavar dam tamsis shel behema enu matzu ilios rabal dam hanefesh. He says he only argues by dam tamsis. There's no reason to say by dam tamsis to make such a gezerah because we don't have so much dam that's called dam tamsis during the time of shechita. There's no reason to make such a gezerah. However, when it comes to the potential of Okay, actually, I'm going too far ahead. So anyway, there's one sheet that says maybe they make a gzera straight up. Okay. Let's see what it is. Rav Papa Oimer the Kuli Yalma Geyser. Really, Taka do make a gzera. Havahachma dama tamsis matzi ramos al dama nefesh kamefagi. Marsa v'shchiach, marsa v'shchiach. So this is the second answer. In other words, maybe they don't argue when it comes to dam sulim. In that situation, everyone holds Yitaka make a gzer because it is common that it possibly could happen. However, when it comes to dam tamsis, it may or may not be shchiach, and therefore maybe it will make a gzer. Bishlam Rav Papa, I can understand the second answer of Rav Papa. Hadid tainis ar b'dam hapsulim yishavel ha'ama. That's why it says, if you spill the dam, if there's dam psul mixed in, you put into the amma, and it says, but dam tamsis shav chama. It mentions two separate cases. El Rav Zvid, Ravin was ninu kasha. In other words, if in fact they argue about the exact same thing, so why are they linked? Why are they two separate statements? If they exactly is the same thing, then they shall be mentioned as one. So we're going to stop there, but it is a good kasha. Question 3. Nisar b'dam sulim yishavach ha'ama b'dam tamsis. Again, Rabbi Lezer machshir. But my commitment for Rabbi Lezer or Liba, Rabbi Zvid, Rabbi Papa, my nafkamina bin haperushim. Okay, very good question. So according to Rabbi Zvid, is the first answer. Are you geyser gzer b'mikdash? Rabbi Papa says no, we are geyser, and they argue if dam tamsis and matzi shiyarbel al dam nefesh. If you're actually going to have more dam tamsis than dam nefesh, probably not. The nafkamina is they argue only when it comes to dam tamsis, or they also argue by dam sulim. According to the first sheet of Rav Zvid, they argue about both. So we have a kasha. If that's the case, why does it say b'dam sulim yishavech? It should say o b'dam tamsis shavech. Why does it say it that way? V'lor vinhu v'teninu. It should be just linked together, and that taka is a good question. Okay. Question TA29. Nisar b'dam sulin yishavach ha'ama b'dam tamas yishavach ha'ama Rabbi Lezer masher him masher gam b'reishul legabi psulin or raka gami dam tamsis uva mazet talui. So it's basically the same question. Whether or not you hold it's are we geyser gzera and therefore it's the machlok is on both, or is it dafka by dam tamsis is the machlok? Let's see how he writes it. Rav Zvid poli gam b'psulin disraeli and geyserin. Shemi Yarbra posted Gzera b'mikdash. Rav Papa polig rak b'dam tamsis though goes to do shchiach shiyarbel dam hanefesh. TB2. The Zar b'dam b'psulim yishav chama b'dam tamsis im machshir gam b'psulim. So I wrote Zetoli im geisun Gzera d'Rabbanan al hadavar sheb'mikdash. No Indian dam tamsis im ze meruba zel milsa delo shchiach. It's not exactly the right answer, but it's pretty close. Adkan.